Before diving into this incredible story, remember to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Here, every story has something to say, and you won't want to miss a single one. The afternoon sun barely filtered through the large windows of the courtroom, casting long shadows on the polished parquet floor. Every seat was occupied, every gaze tense. The tension was palpable, as if the entire room were holding its breath. The judge, a man with stern features and a reputation for inflexibility, was about to deliver his verdict. Among the witnesses, a black boy, barely 15 years old, seemed strangely calm. His deep, attentive eyes followed the judge's every move. Rumors circulated in the courtroom. This boy was connected to the case in a way no one dared reveal. His silence carried as much weight as the accusations themselves. As the judge raised the gavel to close the hearing, the boy suddenly stood up. A murmur rippled through the room, followed by a deafening silence. All eyes turned to him. He took a step forward, his back straight, and stared unflinchingly at the judge. Then, in a clear but firm breath, he uttered two words. Two words that were enough to make the most feared man in the court pale. His face fell, his hand trembled above the gavel, and a chill ran through the assembly. No one could have foreseen the effect of those two words. They carried a secret, a truth the court was not ready to hear, and which would shatter the lives of everyone present in that room. The black boy stepped forward, his footsteps echoing on the courtroom floor. All eyes were on him, some with curiosity, others with skepticism. The judge, for his part, felt a chill run down his spine. "My father," the boy said simply. Silence fell instantly. Each word seemed to weigh a ton. The judge paled, his jaw tightened. Those two words, so innocent on the surface, revealed a truth that no one in the room could have imagined. The boy was the secret son of a powerful figure, and this family connection changed everything in the current case. The lawyers looked at each other, speechless, as murmurs filled the courtroom. The judge, usually so composed, leaned back slightly in his seat. The verdict he was about to deliver could no longer be impartial, for now the law was confronted with a personal secret that directly affected him. The boy, for his part, remained calm, his gaze fixed on the judge. He knew that those two words would be enough to change everything. And indeed, a few seconds later, the entire courtroom understood that the rest of the hearing would never be the same. The judge tried to regain his composure, but his face betrayed an emotion he couldn't contain. Surprise, fear, and suppressed anger mingled together. He stared at the boy, as if trying to understand how this child had discovered such a deeply buried secret. What do you mean by that?" stammered the judge, his trembling voice echoing in the heavy silence of the room. The boy, impassive, calmly replied, "You know very well what I'm talking about." At these words, a murmur rippled through the courtroom. Lawyers and witnesses exchanged worried glances. Some understood that the trial had just taken a dramatic turn. The accusations and evidence presented up to that point were losing their weight in the face of this unexpected revelation. The judge banged his gavel, trying to restore order, but his hands were trembling. He knew he could no longer deliver his verdict as planned. This boy had just revealed a truth that not only changed the course of the trial but also threatened the judge's reputation and career. The court held its breath, waiting for the boy to speak again. But he, motionless, allowed silence to hang in the air. A silence heavy with consequences, where each second seemed suspended between the past and the uncertain future of all those present. The silence in the courtroom was almost unbearable. All eyes were fixed on the black boy, waiting for him to utter the sentence that would change the course of the trial. He took a deep breath, and his clear voice rang out again. "I am your son." A shock rippled through the courtroom. The judge froze, his eyes wide with disbelief and fear. Murmurs turned into stifled exclamations. The lawyers rose, some to protest, others to regain control of the proceedings, but nothing could stop the shockwave that had just hit the court. The boy continued, in a calm but confident voice. "Everything you have judged here, you can no longer do so impartially. Because this trial directly concerns you." The judge paled even more. His career, his reputation, and even his freedom suddenly seemed threatened. The documents, the evidence, the accusations, everything lost its meaning in the face of this unexpected family revelation. The entire assembly then understood that the court was no longer a place of simple justice, but the scene of a long-kept secret, revealed at the most critical moment. The boy, barely 15 years old, had just turned the situation around with a single word: son. The judge recoiled, trembling, unable to continue. The presiding judge, alerted by this revelation, announced an immediate adjournment. The boy, for his part, sat calmly, satisfied that the truth had finally come out. The court had just entered a new era, and no one would ever see that room in the same way again. The courtroom was in turmoil. Murmurs had given way to exclamations and loud questions. Lawyers crowded around the judge, some to question him, others to try to understand how a family secret could have surfaced at such a critical moment. The judge, his face pale, was trying to maintain a semblance of control. How did you know that?" he asked, his voice trembling. The boy, motionless in his chair, simply replied, "You hid it for too long. I had to know the truth." The tension rose another notch when the presiding judge intervened. "We must suspend this hearing immediately. The bias is obvious, and the trial cannot continue under these conditions." Some witnesses exchanged confused glances, others, horrified, realized that their fate had just changed forever. The judge's secret, carefully guarded until then, had just destabilized the entire assembly. Outside the courthouse, police officers and journalists, alerted by the rumors, crowded at the doors, sensing that something huge had just happened. But inside, only the calm and determined presence of the black boy still dominated the scene. He knew this was only the beginning. The real revelations and their consequences were yet to come. The court, once a symbol of order and law, had just become a theater of secrets, tensions, and long-hidden truths. The judge, for his part, remained frozen, unable to utter a word. The weight of his past decisions and the shock of this unexpected fatherhood had just paralyzed him. Everyone understood that nothing would ever be the same again in this courtroom. The courtroom was now deserted, the murmurs and commotion quickly moving outside. Journalists, alerted by the strange interruption, had already begun to spread the news: a boy reveals he is the judge's secret son in court. The judge, alone in his office, reread the files he had just signed, his face tense with worry. Every document, every decision he had made suddenly seemed laden with a heavy moral responsibility. His career, his reputation, and even his personal life were now exposed to the scrutiny of the public and his peers. Meanwhile, the black boy returned home, filled with pride and determination. He knew this revelation would shake not only the courtroom but also the long-hidden family dynamics. His mother, sitting in the living room, watched him with admiration. "You were brave, my son. But this is only the beginning." The news spread like wildfire. Lawyers, the judge's colleagues, and even some politicians began speculating about the implications of this revelation. Some saw it as an opportunity for justice, others as a scandal that could destroy a reputation built over decades. The judge, for his part, realized he could never look at the courtroom in the same way again. The boy had not only changed the course of the trial, but he had also brought to light personal truths that no one would have imagined discovering in this hallowed place of justice. The courtroom, once a symbol of order and certainty, became the stage for a new story, where secrets, power, and truth collided irreversibly. And for all those who had attended the hearing, it was now clear that a single word, spoken at the right moment, could change everything. In the days that followed, the judge's office was transformed into an invisible battlefield. Emails, phone calls, and anonymous letters poured in from all sides. Some demanded explanations, others made open threats. The media, meanwhile, had turned the case into a veritable national saga. The judge and his hidden son was on everyone's lips. The judge, once self-assured and unwavering, wandered aimlessly in his office, unable to find any way out. He knew that every decision he made from now on would be scrutinized, judged not only for its legality but for its moral integrity. Colleagues who once respected him now regarded him with suspicion, and even his closest friends avoided sensitive topics. Meanwhile, the black boy wasn't just observing. He understood that the truth could be a powerful tool. He asked to meet his father in the quiet of a room away from the courtroom. "You must take responsibility for what you have hidden for years," he said firmly. "Justice is not just what is said here. It begins with the truth." The judge, his eyes brimming with tears, finally grasped the magnitude of his past mistakes. This boy, barely a teenager, had not only shattered his private life but also his public role. He was now faced with a choice: continue to hide behind his authority or accept his responsibilities, both to his son and before the law. The courtroom seemed distant, almost unreal. But every future decision would be marked by this revelation. The boy, by speaking at the precise moment, had set in motion a chain of events that would transform not only the court, but the lives of everyone involved. For the first time in years, the judge understood that true justice could not be served without courage, without honesty, and without confronting truths that one would sometimes prefer to ignore. News of the revelation spread far beyond the courtroom. Newspapers, television channels, and social media were flooded with analysis, commentary, and speculation. Everywhere, the judge's name was linked to an unexpected family scandal, and some were calling for his immediate resignation. In his office, the judge was besieged by his colleagues and lawyers, some seeking to protect him, others to exploit his vulnerability. But the boy, calm and determined, remained by his side. He understood that this crisis could become a lesson for his father and for all those who believed that power alone was enough to control everything. "Father, you can no longer ignore the truth," he said. "Every action you take now will define who you truly are. Not just as a judge, but as a man." The judge, his shoulders hunched and his face etched with stress, nodded. He knew he could no longer hide behind the authority of his position. He had to face the legal and moral consequences of his past decisions, and above all, learn to accept his son's presence in his life. Outside, journalists waited anxiously for the judge to emerge, while protesters demanded justice and transparency. Every step he took was scrutinized, every word he spoke analyzed. But the boy walked beside him, a silent yet powerful presence, reminding everyone that the truth could neither be ignored nor erased. In the midst of this media and legal storm, the court and the judge had changed forever. The black boy, by daring to utter those two simple words, had triggered an upheaval that would redefine justice, family, and authority. And in this chaos, a new, fragile but promising relationship began to take shape between the judge and his son. The relative calm that followed the media storm allowed the judge to reflect. In the silence of his office, he observed the black boy who had sat opposite him, his hands resting on his knees, his gaze filled with a maturity surprising for his age. I never meant to hurt you," the judge murmured, his voice trembling. "I thought I was protecting my reputation, but I ended up depriving you of me, and of the truth." The boy stared at him for a moment, then replied firmly. "The truth is more important than any reputation. You still have a chance to do the right thing." Encouraged by these words, the judge began to take concrete steps. He overturned some contested decisions, asked the court to re-examine sensitive cases, and undertook to publicly explain the situation. His career, though tarnished, was slowly beginning to regain a degree of credibility thanks to his newfound honesty. At the same time, the judge and his son began to build a fragile but sincere relationship. They spent time together, talking not only about the past but also about the future. Each conversation was an attempt to heal the wounds caused by years of secrets and lies. Outside, the press was closely following these developments. But the boy, instead of being overwhelmed by public attention, focused on what really mattered, rebuilding his relationship with his father and ensuring that justice was properly served. For the first time in a long time, the judge understood that true power lay not in authority or fear, but in integrity, honesty, and the ability to right one's wrongs. And in this process, he discovered that his son was not only a witness to the past, but a force that could help him become a better man and a fairer judge. The courtroom felt both familiar and different. The worn benches, the judge's gavel, the respectful silence, it was all there, but the atmosphere had changed. Everyone present knew that things would never be the same again. The judge entered, accompanied by his son. All eyes immediately turned to them. Some murmured, others exchanged worried glances. The black boy walked confidently, aware that his presence changed the dynamic of the room. When he sat down beside his father, the judge felt a new strength surge through him. He was no longer alone, and this presence reminded him that truth must now guide each of his decisions. "We are resuming the hearing," he announced, his voice firm but measured. The lawyers straightened their posture, and even the witnesses felt the palpable tension. But everyone knew that attention was no longer solely focused on the evidence or the arguments, it was also focused on the truth that had come to light. The boy, silent but attentive, observed every movement. With each statement, each objection, he better understood the significance of the 2 words he had spoken that day. He had not only shaken the court, but had also given his father the opportunity to become a better man. When the first witness spoke, there was a slight hesitation in the room. Everyone knew that this hearing would not be ordinary. The court, once a place of routine and rigid protocols, had become the stage for a new era, one where personal truth and justice converged, and where every word, every gesture could carry immense weight. The judge glanced at his son. A simple gesture, a silent sigh, and they both knew that, despite the challenges ahead, they would face this ordeal together. The son was no longer just a spectator, he was now an integral part of this quest for justice and honesty. The courtroom was packed. The murmurs had died away, replaced by a tense anticipation. Everyone present knew that the decisive moment was approaching. The judge, now calmer but deeply aware of his responsibilities, looked up at his son. "Thank you for staying by my side," he murmured. The boy smiled slightly, a mixture of pride and compassion in his eyes. "We have to face this together." When the last witness had finished, the judge rose. His voice, firm and clear, resonated throughout the courtroom. "Having considered all the elements and having acknowledged the truth that my son has revealed, I declare that." An absolute silence fell. All eyes were fixed on him. Justice must prevail above all else, and everyone here must be judged not only according to the law, but also according to integrity and truth. The decisions were announced, restoring a balance that many thought had been lost. The defendants were tried fairly, previous errors were corrected, and the court regained its legitimacy. But more importantly, something deeper had been repaired, the relationship between the judge and his son. After the hearing, in the now empty corridor, the boy took his father's hand. "You have become a better man today," he said softly. The judge nodded, his eyes filled with tears. "And you taught me what no law can ever teach, that truth and courage can change lives." The setting sun bathed the room in a soft, almost symbolic light. The court, once a mere place of procedures and rules, had been the scene of a profound transformation, a man confronted with his secrets, a boy revealing the truth, and justice finally restored to its most humane form. The judge and his son left the court side by side. In the outside world, curious eyes and cameras awaited, but they both knew they had gained much more than public recognition, they had gained truth and reconciliation. And for the first time in years, they moved forward together, free of their secrets and ready to face the future.